Hey everyone, welcome back to the Alberta Roundup. I'm your host, Rachel Emmanuel. For this week's interview, we are joined live with prominent Alberta lawyer Jeffrey Rath. Rath is the lead counsel on a proposed lawsuit that seeks financial redress for Calgary businesses that were forced to close during the COVID-19 pandemic. Mr. Rath, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
So I know that this proposed lawsuit stems from the recent Ingram decision in which the Calgary's Court of King's Bench determined that some of the public health orders were illegal. And you saw an opportunity there to maybe get some redress for some of the businesses that were forced to close. Can you explain how the Ingram decision opened up the possibility for this class action lawsuit?
Yeah, and first of all, this isn't a proposed lawsuit. It actually is a lawsuit on behalf of Rebecca Ingram and Christopher Scott. What we're seeking is certification to have the action certified as a class action on behalf of every other business or person in Alberta that was economically harmed as a result of all of the orders of Jason Kenney and Dina Hinshaw that the Alberta Court of King's Bench found to be ultra vires or illegal under the Public Health Act. So the process, moving forward is, there is a lawsuit on behalf of Ms. Ingram and Mr. Scott, but we've applied to the court for certification of the class action, and the hearing of that certification motion is currently scheduled to take place in the first week of October of this year.
So when we're talking about a class action lawsuit, how does that work? Do people have to apply to be a part of it? Do you automatically just represent all Alberta businesses that would fall under the category?
The way it works in Alberta is that if people don't want to be part of it, they would opt out by contacting our office. That being said, if people go to rathandcompany.com, and again, that's rathandcompany.com, and tap on the business class action tab, you'll see that we've have set out all the pleadings, we've set out the background of the lawsuit, and what we're asking people to do is to fill out a form with all of their information, because one of the things that we're trying to do is to get a handle on the scope of the losses that people have suffered in this province. We suspect that it's in the high billions of dollars, in excess of $10 billion. Just looking at some of the numbers that we've been seeing and extrapolating from there. Some businesses, their losses are as little as a few $100,000, but certainly medium-sized small businesses, restaurant chains, and others have losses in the tens of millions of dollars as a result of all of those illegal COVID orders, and the government of Alberta unlawfully and thoughtlessly destroying businesses in this province.
So when you talk about, you're still sort of in that information gathering portion, you're still looking to hear from businesses to see how they were impacted. Do you have any idea what sort of monetary amount you would be seeking?
Well, I mean, every business is going to be compensated on the basis of what their losses were. As I've indicated, some businesses that can quickly quantify their losses, like small, beauty salons, physiotherapy offices, dental offices, etc. They can say, "Oh, okay, I was shut down for 6 weeks. Our revenue leading up to that was approximately X number of dollars per week." Multiplied by however many weeks we were shut down. Our losses are several $100,000, right? On the other hand, as I've indicated, restaurant chains, or people that had groups of restaurants, the losses could be in the tens of millions of dollars. And certainly there are restaurant groups and restaurants in this province that were completely bankrupted, as a result, of these thoughtless and illegal orders. And what are the costs of making those people whole for having their families, lives and livelihoods completely destroyed, by somebody, somebody who is so incompetent that she didn't even know the scope of her authority under the statute that she was acting under.
When
And
we're talking,
I'm referring specifically to Dina Hinshaw.
sure. Yeah, definitely one of the civil servants. I think we were just chatting about this on the phone the other day, just the amount of money that she herself collected from Canadian and Alberta specifically taxpayers, I think to the tune of well over $500,000. And then when we look at some of the impacted businesses, it is certainly concerning. I think a lot of people are really excited about this lawsuit. Is there a burden of proof on the businesses to prove how much they lost during the period that they were forced to close?
Well, obviously, there's going to be a requirement for the businesses to prove, their losses. But one of the great things about this lawsuit is that liability really isn't an issue, thanks to the Ingram decision in the Court of King's Bench. The orders were, by declaration of the Court of King's Bench, were all illegal. We had this process where, by Dina Hinshaw claiming to be everyone's doctor and claiming to act as the chief medical officer of health, would go into cabinet and basically take medical advice from a divinity school dropout, specifically Jason Kenney, with regard to public health orders in the province of Alberta, without any thought to the harm that was going to be done by these orders. The other issue that I'd like people to consider with regard to this lawsuit, because I know there's people out there that say, oh, well, you're suing the Alberta government, so it's our tax dollars, that are going to have to pay for this. People that are concerned about that, I'd like to ask them to consider, whether they think would be appropriate if, a government employee driving drunk were to run over one of their parents and the taxpayers were on the hook for that, whether or not the government should pay. Clearly, everything that happened in this case was as a result of government malfeasance, government negligence, I would say gross negligence in terms of the way all of this rolled out. That needs to be kept in mind, by everybody that's looking at this. And we're obviously hoping that the citizens in Alberta, will look at the fairness of this situation and say, on what model, let's even assume, which, I think is wrong, but let's assume for a minute that locking down the businesses of healthy people, preventing them from providing services, to other healthy people, made any sense whatsoever. And let's assume that it was a bona fide good for the public at large, and that what was done was actually for the public good. On what theory should the public benefit at the expense of a small class of Alberta citizens, right? I mean, we've got people that, have literally, have had a huge fiscal hole put in the middle of their businesses. They had to take on partners they never wanted. Businesses that were otherwise debt-free are now in hock to the tune of millions of dollars to banks that they've had to borrow money from to keep their businesses whole and moving forward. And, of course, which, because so much of the equity in their businesses were destroyed by these foolish orders promulgated by Jason Kenney and Dina Hinshaw. So, our question is on what theory should the government escape liability for this?
So lead plaintiffs on the case, I know one of them is Chris Scott. Can you explain a little bit about who they are?
Sure. Rebecca Ingram, of course, was a gym owner that brought forward the Ingram decision. And in that case was actually necessary to provide the foundation to this class action, because there's a section of the Public Health Act that says that the government's immune from suit for any actions taken under the Public Health Act. So it was very important to us, from a legal perspective, that we won the judgment from the Court of King's Bench saying that all of the orders of Dina Hinshaw were ultra vires the Public Health Act and illegal. So from our analysis and the work that we did in our office, it wasn't enough to have the court to say that the orders violated the charter. What we really needed was the order saying that saying that Dina Hinshaw's public health orders were outside of the scope of the Public Health Act, because as a result, neither Dina Hinshaw or the government of Alberta now enjoy any protection whatsoever from lawsuit, because these orders were not issued under the Public Health Act because they were ultra vires, right? So that's the first point. And that was the case that Rebecca brought forward when her gym was improperly shut down by Dina Hinshaw. And of course, Rebecca's gym was well run. It was an extremely large facility. So, even if you believed in all the social distancing nonsense that they were promulgating and telling people that, if you went to Walmart or Costco, you weren't going to get COVID. But if you went to a mom and pop on the corner, you're going to get COVID. Or if you simply followed the arrows on the floor of the co-op, you weren't going to get COVID, if you remember that foolishness.
Unfortunately, I do. Unfortunately.
All of those silly orders that were issued, right? Rebecca, was running an extremely, well-managed, clean facility. There's no documented cases of COVID at her facility whatsoever, yet she was being shut down and she was forced to sell her business at a loss. Chris Scott, was correctly protesting the fact, that these orders were illegal. As it turns out, he was right. Yet Chris Scott was taken away in handcuffs and thrown in jail, and his business was padlocked, and he was prevented from running a business and feeding his family, as a result of these illegal orders. So of course, Chris is suing, for the business losses that accrued, as a result of these illegal orders, and will also be seeking damages on Chris's behalf, for the manner in which he was treated, which was completely egregious.
When we talk about the illegal orders, specifically right now, we're looking at financial redress for businesses, but have you given any thought to other potential lawsuits that could stem from the Ingram decision?
Well, I mean, as far as it goes, we're looking, the class of applicants under Ingram would include any individual that suffered economic losses as a result of the illegal orders. In the coming days, we're going to be issuing another press release and announcing a major class action lawsuit with regard to vaccine injuries in the province of Alberta. Because let's not forget that the injuries as a result of Dr. Hinshaw's negligence wasn't limited to the illegal orders that she issued. Remember Dina Hinshaw, telling people that, if they had the AstraZeneca vaccine, and after that was discontinued because it was hurting people and injuring people and causing heart disease and other problems, she was standing up in public saying, oh, well, it doesn't matter that, you've already taken a drug that may have hurt your health. You should go out and take whatever other shots available. Take Pfizer, take Moderna. It's all good. Take my vaccine buffet. That's what I've been doing. Well, people were horribly injured as a result of Dina Hinshaw's advice that people sign up for her vaccine buffet. And, so we'll be representing individuals that were harmed by that negligent medical advice of Dr. Hinshaw's, and her conspiracy to commit assault in a civil sense, not a criminal sense, but a conspiracy to commit civil assault by, acting in lockstep with Theresa Tam and other representatives of the government of Canada, repeatedly telling people that the vaccines were safe and effective while they were simultaneously hiding information from the public about vaccine injuries and how dangerous these vaccines actually were, for people. I mean, it was certainly well known from the Pfizer data itself that if you were a child under the age of 18, you're far more likely to be harmed by the vaccines than you were to be harmed by COVID itself. I referred to it repeatedly in correspondence with the Prime Minister and Dina Hinshaw and Theresa Tam. It was Table 14 of the Pfizer EUA application of the United States, where Pfizer itself submitted documents to the American government that indicated that for children under the age of 18, they would notionally save one life per million of children under the age of 18 if they got the Pfizer COVID vaccine from dying from COVID, but they were going to put 34 children into the intensive care unit with intense myocarditis if they took the vaccine. And of course, all of that information was suppressed by Dina Hinshaw, it was suppressed by Theresa Tam, it was suppressed by the Trudeau government, because they didn't want people to really know what the risks were associated with these vaccines. So in effect, what they were doing was conspiring to prevent people from obtaining full informed consent with regard to the shots. So we say from a legal perspective, beyond negligence, breach of fiduciary duty, public duty, etc., all of them, including Dina Hinshaw, in a civil sense, were conspiring to commit assault and battery on every citizen in Canada by conspiring to hide information with regard to vaccine safety from the Canadian public. Another good example of this is the fact that the Minister of Health has the authority, notwithstanding confidentiality provisions in the vaccine supply contracts, to release those contracts to the public if they contained information that would be germane to the public in making a decision as to whether to take the vaccines or not. Well, a Liberal MP by the name of Housefather in committee in Ottawa stated publicly that the reason that they can't release these contracts is because the vaccine companies themselves don't warrant the vaccines for safety, and that the vaccines themselves didn't undergo adequate safety, long-term safety studies, and that the government was, forced to, put the vaccines out under those circumstances, even though the vaccines weren't warranted for safety and the government had to indemnify the vaccine companies from any lawsuits arising from unsafe vaccines being put on the market. Obviously, all of those facts, if they'd been made available to the Canadian public, would have mitigated towards a large number of Canadians not having their children vaccinated or not agreeing to take part in this huge medical experiment that has injured literally tens of thousands of Canadians from coast to coast.
So, in this instance, we're looking at financial redress from the Alberta government for affected businesses. But when we're talking more about the COVID injury stuff that you've just mentioned, is there any way for Dina Hinshaw herself to be held accountable for her actions, or is she completely protected as a employee of Alberta at the time?
Well, I mean, that's the problem. I mean, there's something you're taught in law school, which is you never sue a man of straw or a person that doesn't have any means. The problem is that the first successful lawsuit against Dina Hinshaw would bankrupt her at a personal level. So, suing Dina Hinshaw unfortunately doesn't accomplish anything. What we're hoping is that Danielle Smith will live up to the promises that she made when she was running to be premier of the province of Alberta, and to take measures to ensure that this doesn't happen again. And I certainly think that one of the things that should be considered by the Alberta government is that a criminal investigation be undertaken of every member of AHS and the College of Physicians and Surgeons and others who were involved in conspiring to hide information from the public with regard to the safety of these vaccines. Because clearly, the degree to which all of these people engaged in propaganda, with their safe and effective campaigns, take the first available vaccine campaigns, Dina Hinshaw standing up in public and literally providing false information with regard to children who allegedly died from the vaccines when they actually were dying from severe pediatric deformations and conditions, or alternatively, fourth stage cancers, needs to be looked at from the standpoint of whether it's criminal sanctions or sanctions by the College of Physicians and Surgeons. Were the College of Physicians and Surgeons to actually ever take action against anyone that was involved, in this severe breach of medical ethics? So those are all things that, I think that the Premier herself should be pushing and, should be demanding that her Attorney General deal with, at the highest level in Alberta, as she promised to do when she was running for the leadership of the Progressive Conservative Party of Alberta. We certainly hope that there's going to be a public inquiry, that all of these things aren't simply going to be swept under the rug, as so many of the bureaucrats, who are responsible for all of this hope to happen, and that are all pushing behind the scenes to have the government, continue to engage, in an ongoing cover-up with regard to everything that went on during the phony public health management crisis that we went through in 2020, 2021, and 2022.
Just my last question here before I let you go. So when you're talking about criminal sanctions, would you like Dina Hinshaw to face jail time for her actions forcing the vaccine on people during the pandemic?
I don't think that's for me to determine. I think that there needs to be a proper investigation of all of this by the Attorney General of Alberta with a view towards determining whether culpability, should fall or not. Certainly we say from a civil standpoint that Dina Hinshaw should be, and the government of Alberta should be held civilly liable for the fact that Dina Hinshaw was grossly incompetent, didn't understand the limits of her authority under the Public Health Act, and issued literally, in excess of 100 orders that destroyed businesses on this province that completely exceeded her authority under the Public Health Act. So, that's where we're focused right now. But I certainly hope that Premier Smith understands that, that this isn't, that she shouldn't be listening to the bureaucrats that surround her and simply continue to sweep this under the carpet, because the people that elected her demand justice and demand a full public inquiry into what went on.
Jeff, thanks so much for your time today. I know my viewers will really appreciate your insight and all the information about the lawsuit you're working on. We will certainly be following that story with interest in the coming months. And to the rest of my viewers, we will be back with our regular programming on Saturday. You won't want to miss this week's episode. As always, thanks for tuning in. I'll see you guys in a couple days. God bless.